Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for Telesur. I'm Cody Weddle here in Caracas, Venezuela. With just 4 days to go until the Venezuelan parliamentary elections, attacks on Nicolas Maduro's government have intensified. The Venezuelan government has rejected on Wednesday a letter addressed to the international community signed by Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy and British Prime Minister David Cameron. Now, the document criticized Venezuelan authorities and cast doubt on the peaceful environment for the elections. As President Maduro explained, the elections will not be won by violence, contrary to what the letter implies.
Thanks to Chavez, we don't have to fight a war with weapons, but we have to fight a different kind of war, the war of politics, and we must win with the only weapon we have, our conscience and votes. We'll win with votes.
And Venezuela's National Electoral Council has been working for months to guarantee total transparency during this Sunday's parliamentary elections. Our correspondent Isabel Fimbo now with more here from Caracas.
The electoral process in Venezuela begins with voters searching for their identification numbers to find the table where they have to vote. A thumbprint activates the system and proves that the voter hasn't voted before. All the parties appear on the screens in big clear boxes. People can also search by candidate's name and their face will appear. Once you've pressed on the candidate you want, a message appears asking if you're sure. And when you are, you simply press vote. The machine then prints out a paper proving you voted, which you then pop in the box. Finally, after signing, you dip a finger in indelible ink so that people know you've voted. Venezuela's electoral body is confident that fraud is almost impossible. Tania D'Amelio, director of the National Electoral Council, says that the system ensures that.
In Venezuela, one vote is guaranteed. Then, of course, the facility that we have, that is our automated system. On top of that, on that day, all Venezuelans audit our vote. How do we audit our vote? A proof of vote comes out where you can identify with certainty if you voted.
Sale un comprobante de votación donde tú puedes verificar si ciertamente tu ejercicio al voto es igual al comprobante de voto.
It's vital for the result of the election for voters to have complete trust in the voting system.
There is no possibility of fraud. It is impossible that there is fraud in our electoral system. It's good, perfect, very good. I believe it is the best that there is now.
The Venezuelan electoral system is designed to be impregnable. Fully automated and auditable, it's streets ahead of many of the most developed countries. And on Sunday, under the gaze of observers from different parties and nations, it will be put to the test.
Now, the Venezuelan people have given their stamp of approval to the system, yet the Venezuelan opposition have said they won't recognise the result of the election. Isabel Fimbo, Telesur, Caracas.
The UNISUR electoral mission that has been following preparations weeks ahead of Sunday's poll has said that conditions are guaranteed for a fair result. Now, according to the mission headed by the former Dominican president, Leonel Fernandez, the violent incidents registered have been isolated. The mission says it has not found any evidence of a coup being organized by the opposition parties, nor has it found evidence of partiality from the National Electoral Council. Talks continue in Havana. The Colombian government has rejected a proposal made by the FARC guerrillas to create special peace zones. Now, the proposal aimed to guarantee that paramilitary forces would not take advantage of a disarmament, but also to demilitarize the country. The FARC leadership proposed a monitoring mission from the United Nations to oversee those peace zones. However, the government interpreted the proposal as a threat.
The famous Terra Paz exists only in the imagination of the FARC. We want a Colombia with a future of strength, improvement, well-being. To divide it would be impossible. We have not received this mission, and it therefore does not even remotely form part of our outlook and conduct.
In response, the FARC delegation lamented the government's attitude and reminded the government that the Colombian police force should be in charge of the country's security and not the army.
Security is a problem that has more to do with the police rather than the military forces, And so we consider the function of policing in the territories can be carried out in many ways without necessarily resulting in the continued presence of the armed forces, which we believe should take place after the closing of the agreement in order to other functions are performed, such as the defense of our territory and their sovereignty.
Argentina's Secretary for Human Rights has described the finding of the 119th missing grandson by the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo as a victory for the policy of truth and justice carried out by the government of Cristina Fernandez. From Buenos Aires now, our correspondent Laureano Ponce with more on that good news story.
In a press conference held on their headquarters on Tuesday, Argentine human rights organization Grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo announced they have identified the 119th missing grandchild. He is Mario Bravo, a field worker who was born under custody in 1977 during Argentina's last dictatorship.
I feel happy, I feel free, I feel freedom and euphoria, and you want others to feel the same way. I feel like I want to go out and tell people, you can do this, you can feel this too.
Unlike most grandchildren who have recovered their identity, Mario Bravo's mother is still alive and was able to meet him before the press conference.
Having been able to find another grandchild, and that his mother was still alive, and he is so pure, so sincere, that makes us feel sure about what we do, and that we are doing the right thing.
Since the ruling Front for Victory came to power in 2003, the grandmothers have always worked together with the Argentine state. Whether they will be able to continue such work under a new right-wing government remains an open question.
The achievements we have made as a people are not going to be taken back as long as the people defend them, as long as we are capable of understanding that the things that previous governments have done right need to be state policies, and that state policies should not be perishable through history.
Despite the change in the political orientation of the future government, the grandmothers will continue to find strong support by the Argentine people to keep their struggle. Laureano Ponce, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
A volcano has erupted in Nicaragua after not registering any activity for the past 110 years. The Momotombo volcano erupted late on Tuesday. Now, the Nicaraguan government is monitoring the situation, but so far no evacuations have been ordered. The volcano had only erupted 17 times since its formation in the year 1524. Relatives of the 43 disappeared students of Ayotzinapa met with Mexico's Attorney General. Now, after the meeting, the parents of the missing students expressed a cautious optimism. With more now, we turn to our correspondent there in Mexico, Clayton Kahn.
Only blocks away from the Los Pinos presidential residence, the families of the 43 disappeared students begin to break down their once indefinite sit-in encampment after Mexican authorities agreed to form a new special unit to investigate the case that will have the participation of the independent experts from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights.
For us, this is significant because we are now inaugurating a new stage in the investigation that leaves, that we could say, a good flavor for the relatives and a degree of hope that a new justice is on the horizon.
Yet the parents warn that this optimism for breaking new ground 14 months since police attacked and disappeared the youth is conditioned and that their public protests will not subside.
We are not happy nor satisfied. We parents of the 43 youth have said this before.
The news of formally launching new lines of investigation that will prioritize the search of the 43 students comes nearly a year since the former Attorney General essentially declared that the case was closed. The previous government hypothesis was later to be deemed scientifically impossible and now has been abandoned as part of the official investigation.
The teacher training students were deprived of their liberty, deprived of their lives, incinerated and tossed into the San Juan River. In that order, this is the historic truth of the events.
Although the parents are relieved that yet to be specified new investigative lines will be launched, they say they want to seek a legal route to formally charge and sanction former and currently acting officials that participated in the elaboration of the so-called historic truth investigation.
A person that lends themselves to this or invents such a declaration totally or without giving importance to the feeling of us parents or without caring for the lives of the youth should definitely be punished.
To guarantee further transparency in the new investigation as well as respect for the families of the victims, the authorities agreed to meet with the parents on a bi-weekly basis to brief them on advances. And the next step for the parents and their legal representatives is a meeting with Mexico's Interior Minister Miguel Ángel Osorio Chong on December 10th in the resort city of Acapulco in the state of Guerrero. Clayton Can, Telesur, Mexico City.
Negotiators at the COP21 climate summit in Paris have spent a second day working towards a final agreement on measures to avoid catastrophic climate change. Now, big differences do remain, especially between rich and poor countries, over the details of a treaty to replace the Kyoto Accord. Now, the sticking points include the size and timing of emissions reductions, especially by industrialized countries, how much money rich countries should pay to help poorer countries face up to climate change, and whether this should include payments for the loss and damage these countries already experience. And finally, how far any agreement should be legally binding. And Telesur asked the executive secretary of the UN's climate change body, Cristina Figueres, if she thought a binding agreement on cutting greenhouse gases would really be achieved at this meeting.
We need a binding agreement that protects the most vulnerable from the impact of climate change over the coming decades.
Will you achieve in Paris what wasn't achieved in Peru?
We never expected a binding agreement in Peru. It was always planned for now.
And now it will really happen?
Of course.
Indigenous movements from around the world are pushing to be heard at the climate talks in Paris. Our correspondent now, Luis Arroyo, has more.
Heads of state have gone, and now the talks to reach a global climate agreement have officially begun here in Paris. The indigenous peoples were the first to raise their voice, this time against the program of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradations, or RED.
We find that a lot of these voluntary RED projects, at the end of the day, many of them end up being private reserves, social bosque projects, and where indigenous peoples and non-indigenous, mestizo people, forest people who are dependent on the local environment, they cannot go into the forest anymore to get the wood for their homes and firewood, and because those trees are now protected in these carbon trading regimes, and they say, well, who?
Leaders from indigenous communities in the Americas say this United Nations mechanism only uses forests and agriculture as sponges for northern industrialized countries' pollution. They have vowed to resist and fight against those powers who pretend to harm their rights, lands, and environments.
We are here to bring that message. We are defending something sacred for us. The sky has no price, the oceans have no price, our corn, our trees, they are still sacred. We are here to defend that, and I hope that the world listens to us and understands that the solution should not rely on money.
Indigenous have warned that the Paris Agreement could be a crime against humanity and Mother Earth. Indigenous people will conduct protests this week in Paris in order to raise their voice against capitalism. These actions have been approved by French authorities, who have imposed a strict ban on protest. Luis Arroyo, Telesur, Paris.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has urged lawmakers to approve airstrikes against the Islamic State in Syria. Now, according to Cameron, Britain could make a real difference by joining the U.S.-led campaign to destroy the militant group. Now, the House of Commons will be spending 10 hours debating on airstrikes in Syria. Labor leader Jeremy Corbyn is against military action and wants a peaceful and humanitarian solution instead. The voting will happen later today, and if approved, the airstrikes will begin shortly thereafter.
The question before the House today is how we keep the British people safe from the threat posed by ISIL. And, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear from the outset. This is not about whether we want to fight terrorism, it's about how best we do that. I respect that governments of all political colours in this country have had to fight terrorism and have had to take the people with them as they do so. And I respect people who come to a different view from the government and the one I'll set out today, and those who vote accordingly. And I hope that provides some reassurance to members right across the House.
Thousands of citizens took to the streets of London to protest against Prime Minister David Cameron's bid to launch airstrikes on Syria. Now, the British Parliament is set to vote the bill authorizing Cameron to join the U.S.-led coalition bombing the Islamic State in the Arab nation. Despite polls showing that the airstrikes are not popular there, the ruling party has reportedly gathered the votes necessary to approve the bill. We don't need foreign troops to fight ISIS. That's the sentiment voiced by the Iraqi government after the U.S. said it will send forces there to combat Islamic State. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter offered few details on the elite special operations unit they are planning to deploy there. Iraq has said that any deployment of foreign troops on its soil cannot happen without approval of its government. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says he is willing to meet his Turkish counterpart this week. This will be the two countries' first high-level talk since Ankara shot down one of Moscow's warplanes, and it also comes amid Russia's defense ministry accusing that the family of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is directly involved in oil trade with the Islamic State group. In the latest attempt to capture everyone involved in the November 13th Paris attacks, French authorities apprehended a man they believe provided a hideout for the alleged architect behind the attacks. Authorities are keeping the suspect at the headquarters of Homeland Security, but have yet to release further details about the suspect. On Tuesday, the European Union announced a new $370 million aid package for over 1 million refugees in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. The funding will be allocated to education, water, food, and health care, as well as improving economic opportunities for refugees living in those countries. The EU also hopes that by improving the lives of refugees in those host countries, it can reduce the number of people setting out to reach Europe. And in the Gaza Strip now, Palestinian national leaders are giving their blood in support of the Palestinian Intifada. More now with Noor Harazin.
Islamist and national movements in Gaza Strip launched Tuesday morning a blood donation campaign in support of the Palestinian people in the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem. The campaign aims to help the victims of the popular uprising, which has resulted in thousands of injured by the Israeli war machine for 3 consecutive months. The announcement was made at a press conference held in front of the headquarters of the Central Blood Bank Society in Gaza City, where dozens of prominent leaders of the Palestinian national factions took part in the event, were seen generously giving blood. The participants confirmed that this move signals the unity of the Palestinian blood in Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and the 1948 occupied territories, and thwarts any Israeli attempt which could aim to enforce geographic and political division of the Palestinian homeland.
The Palestinian people are united in this uprising and confrontation with the Israeli occupation forces, Gaza, the West Bank, the 1948 occupied lands, and Jerusalem. We are in the same battle and are facing the same destiny. This blood donation campaign signals a message of political support to the popular Intifada until it achieves its goals.
A recent report published by the Palestinian Ministry of Health on Monday said that 105 Palestinians have been killed, while thousands were injured by Israeli fire since October the 1st. Noor Harazin, Tesu TV, Gaza.
Myanmar's opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi and the country's outgoing president have agreed on a smooth transfer of power to the new government. The transition talks come just 3 weeks after Suu Kyi's party won a decisive electoral victory. Suu Kyi would like to make changes to the constitution but cannot carry out those changes without the support of the military establishment.
The president has promised a smooth transition, and Aung San Suu Kyi also said we need a good transition towards democracy, as a good example in the future for a young democratic country like us. Our government guarantees that we will make this happen.
On Thursday, China's President Xi Jinping visited Zimbabwe to meet with President Robert Mugabe, who has ruled the country since 1980. The two leaders held talks and oversaw the signing of their ministers of 10 agreements, and memorandums of understanding covering energy, aviation, telecommunications, and investment promotion deals. Xi expressed full confidence in the bilateral relations between the two countries. 5 FIFA sponsors, including Coca-Cola and Adidas, have grouped together to write an open letter to FIFA. The letter was published ahead of FIFA's crucial reform meeting, urging the tournament's executive committee to embrace positive changes. Following FIFA's global corruption scandal that was exposed in May, the company stated they would like to see many reforms subject to independent oversight. And a giant mural featuring Star Wars stormtroopers was painted in the streets of Moscow. The artist Artur Kashak was inspired by the upcoming Star Wars film, The Force Awakens, which will premiere this month. The mural took a week for the artist there to finish. And we're going to end our show now with a clip of Telesur's in-house program, Cultura Latina. This week, we'll be taking you to Honduras for the revival of salsa music there. Here's a little preview.
This week in Cultura Latina, we're going to Central America for a bit of salsa music. Tegucigalpa has returned to an old tradition. The dance floors that ruled in the 1950s disappeared and the city adopted another culture more close to nightclubs and bars. 5 years ago, a small group called Salsa Honduras started to give free dance lessons not only of salsa, but of many other styles. Now there are specialized clubs and constant contests showing a face of Tegucigalpa that few still remembered. After the military coup d'etat of 2009, many art expressions have grown as a response to repression and violence. Over the last 5 years, many dancing schools have appeared and hundreds of young citizens pass their time learning different rhythms and participating in dance contests. All of this and more this week in Cultura Latina.
And plenty more from us on all those stories we reported to you at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Join us on social media as well, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.